Hopefully, this will be the final time we do this. Okay, welcome everybody to another episode, a very special presentation of Phil John's VIP. Um, I'm having a discussion tonight with Georgia Hood. So Georgia, do me a favor, just request to join, and I'm gonna get you in. I'm not even gonna do an introduction until I see your face. Nope, no introduction. Request to join live. I'm gonna see it on my end. Okay, great. I'm gonna bring you in. Fingers crossed. Ah,
Did it work?
thank God.
I'm so sorry.
Thank
I'm a
God.
Luddite. What can
I
I
like.
say?
I
I'm a
got it.
Luddite.
I'm like. Okay, no introduction until I start this. Okay, so we are officially live.
Hi,
Ladies and
Hilda.
gentlemen, thank you once again. Welcome to another episode, a very special episode of Phil John's VIP. I'm here with Georgia Hood, the daughter of the late Kid Hood, who is one of the co-creators of the original Degrassi series. I want to give a special shout out and a thank you to Arlene Lott and Pat Masciani for being kind and generous enough for allowing this to happen. Um, without being very clear to everyone, tonight is going to be a celebration of a man's life and his legacy and his contribution to television. Degrassi, not only just in the US and Canada, but it has impacted a generation of the world. So tonight I introduce everybody to Miss Georgia Hood. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm glad to be
I,
here.
I appreciate it. Um, there's so much that I want to talk about, but one of the first things that I wanted to know was who was Kid Hood and what was his vision?
He was a filmmaker who always was fascinated by film. Even as a young man living in England, he wanted to be a narrator and tell stories. And was fascinated by film. I remember as a kid, we always had films in in the old days, it was the old projection in the basement. He'd be showing, classic films, black and white, car chases, but old films. And he always is just a storyteller. I always wanted to tell a story, and a good story, you know. And came over from England. He'd worked in England as a with Walt Disney and studios, and had a vision and thought that coming to Canada was a new beginning, right? Coming to this country. And so he slowly he started making commercials, and working in the editing room. I remember the old Steenbecks. I don't even know if they film that way, if they edit that way anymore. Probably not. Um, and yeah, he just made some great connections and built up this company, Playing with Time, and then started making the Degrassi series. I had no idea, of course, in the beginning. It started from a children's book, actually. The Ida Makes a Movie, The Kids of Degrassi, started from actually a children's book, a library book. And the main character was a cat, but of course they turned it into a human being, and went along with that. But yeah, he just really wanted to. He was very enthralled by film. And very, I mean, in the end, towards the end of his life, he actually taught at a college in Nova Scotia, taught film studies as well, just because he had such a wealth of knowledge to bring and wanted to share it with younger people.
What made him decide to work with children as a filmmaker?
Um, well, I suppose he met his partner at the time, who was was working with. She taught junior high school. But like you said, the impetus for that particular thing, I don't think they had a vision in the very beginning. We had this
Mm-hmm.
book, Ida Makes a Movie. They thought this would make a great story. They liked the storyline. It was about this little girl who reads about a contest to make a movie, and enters this contest. She makes like a little short, with a Super 8 film, and enters it, and thinks that she's making a movie about garbage. And the people who view the movie, think she's made a movie about war, and then it's this
Wow.
conflict. She has to decide whether she's going to tell the truth about this movie that she's made because she's got awarded under false pretenses. And so she does in the end. She fesses up, tells the truth, still gets the prize, and then it spawned from there. I don't think they had a vision in the very beginning of what it became.
Right.
But once they started, it was very much a commitment to working locally, they weren't actors, right? They were local kids in the community trying to reflect the life of the community. And then just slowly building up. My dad was always interested in dramatic storylines, right? And telling a story that had, real characters. And they're simple stories, but they always had a message that he was trying to get across.
Very topical issue. And during that time, I can remember that there were so many different shows at the time that had topical issues that were geared toward a certain age group. Back then it was teenage pregnancy, drugs, drinking and driving, how kids communicate with their parents. So I felt like it was kind of the time period called for it.
Well, I think, but that's the thing, that they were very much broke a new ground with because there was nothing that was dealing with those kinds of issues at the time. Nothing. They really didn't have much television for use at that time, and they certainly, as you said, were not dealing with topical issues and issues that. I'm not sure quite how they came to that. I suppose Linda Schuyler, my dad's old partner, I guess she had was a teacher, so she was more connected perhaps in the beginning to, knowing some of the issues that kids go through. But they just took it to another level. Like they just really, trying to show both sides. In the beginning, they were trying to show both sides of an issue, but like you said, dealing with violence in the home. And I don't think they realized they tapped into something. And it's interesting you mentioned, yes, it was very much, we thought that they were North American issues, but then they were getting so much interest in Europe as well. I've met people who in the UK who, similarly to people in North America, who are so involved with that program. And it really, as a lot of the casts talk about it, they were a lot of them grew up on the set, right? They were very young. Some of them came in very young and even kept going with junior high and then high school in the series. And a lot of kids, I think, saw themselves, right, in a lot of those issues. And it was sort of like it was a documentary style of filming almost, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it felt that way, I think. But I think I oftentimes wonder, could something like that be done today? Because I feel like today's value system completely changed compared to what it was then.
Interesting. Yeah. There was a sort of an innocence about the program, the way, it was very much, it was a simple way. In fact, it's interesting because, it went on to become Degrassi, The Next Generation. And occasionally I flicked through the channels and my father was no longer involved in it by that point. And it's so shocking to me because suddenly they had makeup on and they were very, very.
They had agents also.
Yes, exactly. Yes. So, but the whole look had changed, right? It was very much very grassroots in the beginning and sort of, not fancy and not, and that was part of its charm. Right. I think that it was, in the early days. So maybe you're right. Life seems so complicated these days. I can't imagine like all of the, the bullying, the cyberbullying that goes on now. Right.
Yeah.
How do we even get close to trying to control
I have a quick comment from a New York City public school teacher that said, as an elementary school educator, I'm so grateful for the positive lessons and messages for the children during that time. I miss what TV was. Thank you to your dad.
Oh, that's lovely to hear. Thank you so much. Thank you. That's lovely. Yeah, I think I've heard that they did use a lot of the shows in schools afterwards to use it as messages to teach. some of these issues that kids couldn't talk about, or how we're going to deal with these things. Oh, that's so lovely that somebody would say that. Yeah. Yeah.
Do you think that looking back on it, you think that uh, um, Degrassi was all that he expected it to be?
Well, as I said, I mean, they were not anticipating what happened. I mean, they
Right.
filled such a void and they just had to run with it. They were always catching up to the next. Oh my God. Like, they had no idea. Like, it was full on. Um, so I don't think they had necessarily had it. It was like literally, I think they were catching up all the time to to how well it was doing, to the
Yeah.
attention it was getting, to being able to keep making more programs, more shows. So I mean, as I said, Linda went on to do other things afterwards. So I suppose for her, it reached. She had more ambitions for what she wanted in the end. But
So, as his daughter, from the sidelines, what did it look like for you? Was it that like, okay, dad is constantly working and trying to catch up with this show, or was it like, were you a part of it, or were you just kind of like on the sidelines with it?
well, as I said in the beginning, it was such grassroots. So
Mm.
yeah, I mean, I was when for the first one for Ida Makes a Movie for the kids of Degrassi, I was probably like 10 or 12, no, maybe 12, 13. And I remember stopping my job was to stop the traffic from going down this one street because we were filming. And
Right.
I'd be in charge of props and stuff like that. Like, that's how, how it really got. I remember my dad, yeah, I mean, great parties as I got older. There were great parties and meeting everyone. But it was always like, go, go, go. Um, and yeah, I think he loved it while he was doing it. And then the nicest thing for me was seeing. I mean, since my father's passed away, I've run into people who worked with my dad, actors, but also producers and directors, and actually more sort of directors who've come to me and said what an impact he made on them and their careers, and how they would go back to him for advice. And he kept in, even though he moved to Nova Scotia, he still kept in touch with a lot of people who would still contact him for advice about what they should do with their careers, or so that was really nice to know that he had made that impact. Yeah.
Yeah. I remember hearing Oprah Winfrey say that the measure of a person's life is the people that they touch. Your legacy is about the people that you touch while you're here. And I think a lot of times we go about doing what it is that we think like we're supposed to do, but we don't really understand fully the impact of a person's life until unfortunately they're not here.
Yeah, well, actually, it's really interesting because, as I said, my dad had moved to Nova Scotia for about 20 years. And actually, just the year before he passed away, Pat Mastriani had organized a palooza, he called it, Degrassi Palooza, at
I
a
remember
hotel.
that.
And my father was very anxious about going, actually. He wasn't sure
Yeah.
he wanted how he felt about connecting with those people. He hadn't seen some of them in so long. And for him, it was exactly what it was, meeting people, meeting fans who were so appreciative of what the series had given to them. For him to hear that back, I think was really moving for him, you know. So, and one of the things I think I just want, this is so important to me, is because I just want him to be, his role was a very fundamental role in the beginning of Degrassi, and I want that to be remembered. So thank you
Absolutely.
so much for doing this.
No, I appreciate it. I think that as a professional, I think we always try to figure out how, when creating content, what the impact we want to have. And for me, it has always been children's television through education in some sort of way. And I remember having a conversation with a couple of friends of mine, and we were talking about like, could our kids today prepare to receive something as simple but yet as profound as Degrassi was? And I can't answer that question because things are just so complicated now. You talk to your average high school student, it's like talking to a creature from another planet. You just don't understand where they're coming from. And would something as innocent work today? And I have that conversation a lot. But I think that one of the things that that he did, and I was always curious about, was the intention. You know, even though you didn't know exactly what you were starting when you began the show, during the course of the show, were the topics intentional?
Oh, for sure. Oh, that
Yeah,
very much so. I mean, my dad was very much involved in the writing too, of the, they oversaw everything from start to finish. So he was very much involved in the writing. So definitely the topics that they wanted to take on and where they wanted to go with that. And interesting, so I've heard again from some of the actors who were on the show, and they said they felt very comfortable on set. Like with my father particularly, a lot of them looked to him as a dad. A lot of them grew up on the set, right? They were young. And they felt comfortable, they felt safe. They looked at my dad kind of like a father figure, a lot of them. So yeah, I mean, they realized that they had these kids' lives at stake, right? I mean, that was a huge chunk of your life as a young kid to be an actor, right?
yeah.
They had to have tutors on set, and so very much aware of trying to cater to children. And he had two young daughters himself, you know. So yeah, I think that was very intentional.
It was like how we do it. So let's talk about, how do we get to naming the street after your dad? Like,
Oh,
what was the thing that sparked that idea for you?
well, thank you. Yeah, so one of the hard things is that my father passed away in Nova Scotia, and a lot of his connections to Degrassi and his film career are all here in Toronto. I mean, he did a little bit of work in Nova Scotia, but most of what he did is here in Toronto. So, um, I we didn't really have. I mean, we had a memorial for my dad's life out in Nova Scotia, but we hadn't had anything here in Toronto with the crew. More, not so much fans, but like this, the core crew, the writers, the directors, the producers, the main characters. A lot of them have sort of reached out to me hoping for something, some sort of closure, right, to kind of acknowledge this.
Yeah.
And of course, COVID happened, is still happening. So I
Yeah.
couldn't figure out how to do that. Like, and I wanted to do it properly. One day I've been visiting a lot of places that my dad worked in and lived in, where he filmed the, the show was at 935 Queen Street East in
Hmm.
Toronto, at Carlaw. And the building is still there. They were there for many, many years. That's where they filmed. That's where they wrote. That's where they edited. Even some of the interviews for the actors were interviewed there. So it's quite an iconic building. It's now a clothing store, interestingly enough, in the front. But I was wandering around various places, and I wandered around there one day, and I noticed that the back alley was completely ruined. It's like the city doesn't even bother to repave it. Actually, I found out it's quite a narrow alley,
Yeah.
and they used to have horse and carriage up in there, down there or something. That's why they don't bother to repave those really narrow ones. Anyway, and it's like full of graffiti on the back of the buildings. There's
Yeah.
weeds everywhere. And I don't know, it just sort of occurred to me. I wanted something to recognize my dad, to remember my dad. And it's this laneway project that we have in Toronto. I don't know if they have a similar thing in New York.
Yeah.
Probably naming all the laneways, or a lot
Yeah.
of them.
Yeah.
And it's a
Yeah.
great way to remember people.
We have,
You
because in New York City, it's kind of like the birthplace of hip hop. So there's a lot of street naming, South Bronx, Queens.
Oh, cool. That's really cool. Yeah. So I thought, wouldn't it be great to name this alleyway after my dad?
I actually had
Where
a chance to see it in Pat's video, and I saw the alleyway where it's graffiti. And I think, with a few little things that are touched up, it'll be a beautiful space.
yeah. So it's a bit of a process, like everything. I've got
Yeah.
this petition going on change.org, where I've had a lot of people post support. It's just a signature, which is great. Um, and some local people as well, and
Yeah.
businesses and residences.
And
So,
I don't want to interrupt you, Georgia, but I just want everyone to know that the change.org link is in my bio on Instagram. So for those who want to sign up or donate, you can go to my bio. Just click and it'll take you straight to the site at change.org.
That's great. Thank you so much. That's lovely. Yeah. So, and then the idea is that, I mean, I'm pretty sure the city will pass it because it's a pretty, I mean, right now, interesting enough in Toronto, we have sort of a name issue going on with street naming. They want to be very careful. We had a street named Dundas Street, which they realized was a man who did not end slavery quick enough. I think he put a kind of few blocks in it to make. So they've decided they don't want to have Dundas Street called Dundas Street, so they're pulling the name, which means that the whole city has to rethink how we do our due diligence for name street calling. So they're in the process of doing that at the time that I'm trying to get this done. So it's another bit of a setback, but you know, I'm sure it'll go through. And then we'll have a party, invite people, we'll have a ribbon cutting ceremony, we'll whitewash the back of the buildings. It's going to be great. Great party.
Listen, I don't care if I'm invited or not, I'm crashing.
Oh, great.
I'll be there.
That'd be awesome. That'd be awesome. Yeah.
I'm crashing, so it'll be all good. I wanted to know, like, with everything that we're trying to do, or you're trying to do with street naming, what do you hope that people will take away from it?
I suppose, like, the first one is the curiosity, right? I mean, I know when I see a street name, you're like, oh, who's that? Who is that person? Or, you know, and then it triggers something and a memory, or you're curious enough to go and look, or, yeah, I guess it's this, the place is significant. I mean, a lot of people went through there, you know, I mean, the alleyway is the parking pad at the back of the building. They would have all used that space. You know, my dad would be out there smoking cigarettes or smoking something else, maybe, you know, with the other people back there. So, I just feel like it's a significant space. So that was the main reason that it made sense to have there. I guess just, I mean, I don't see it as any kind of glory for me or anything like that. I just like the idea of trying to keep the name alive, right? The name, right. It's in a, as Pat pointed out, it's interesting because Degrassi Street was actually named after a real street, you know, so it makes sense that this would also be a lane named after a real person, and a real space that was used for that purpose. So
do you ever go to schools and speak on your dad's behalf when it comes to kind of all things Degrassi?
Hasn't got to that point. I mean, I've done a few interviews,
okay.
But actually, interesting. The laneway backs onto a school, and I am trying to work with that school about maybe even getting the kids involved, which would be so great if they could do like help with a mural on the back of some of the buildings. I'm still working with the parent board there, trying to get this happening. But it would be, again, that would be a really nice way to bring children back into it, you know, and have them beautify the space, help me get rid of the weeds. And so I'm trying to make those connections. But no, when my dad was alive, I didn't think so much about these kinds of things. You know, it's only just someone passed away, as you say, you think about what have they left behind? What's their legacy? How do you want to keep it going? You know?
So I have some questions for you, and you can answer them however you choose to answer it.
Okay, sure.
I call them my 5 Super Soul Sunday questions.
Oh, great.
So I'm going to ask you, what do you know out of being in the industry, and you still are working within the industry, right?
Yes.
Could you just elaborate a little bit before we go on what you're doing in the industry? What roles do you?
Oh, I'm basically just mainly doing background work at this point. But yeah, just hanging out in sets and trying to get a sense of, you know, the film industry in Toronto and what it has to offer. And yeah, I'm not really that's mainly what I'm doing with that. Yeah.
I have one more question from the audience before we go on, but they say, what topics do you think your dad would have wanted to lend his voice to today?
Well, my dad was very active in Nova Scotia in many different projects. I mean, he was very much involved with trying to, well, I mean, one of the things that local community issues. He actually made a short film not too much before he passed away, about trying to get a local. There's a surfing beach very close to where my dad's house is, and there was a hut that was sort of used for showering and changing, but it was completely falling apart, and all these surfer dudes, didn't have anywhere to change, and it's a surfing beach. It's a quite a famous surfing beach, Lawrencetown Beach. So they decided that they were going to, and they kept going to the city, and the city wasn't doing anything about it. So the community just got together and they decided to do it themselves. So they're out there scrubbing all the old paint off and fixing it up and whitewashing, color painting it. And my father filmed the whole thing from start to finish about just the process of, getting the community together on a project like this and then it coming to fruition.
That's activism.
Yeah, there you go. Yes, so very much local projects. Was very into the environment. He built himself a couple of windmills on his property. He had lots of sun. What do you call those things? To catch the sun. I can't think of the word.
Oh, for like the electricity, like the
yes.
Yeah, so, I can't think of it. Yeah.
Gosh, I can't think of sun. Anyway, yeah, he was very much into, had his own chickens, his own garden, very much into local. So this is sustainable issues, I guess. Sustainable community issues are the things that my father would be very much interested in.
So tell me, what do you know about the industry now that you didn't know years ago?
That it's well, I'm not involved enough, I guess, to know the answer. You probably know more than I do.
Yeah.
In that sense. But just that it's continually changing, and yeah, I'm not sure how to answer. How would you answer something like that?
Yeah.
What would you think?
What do I know now about
Yeah.
it? That I believe that in this industry, work-life balance is very, very important.
Right.
That
sure.
I think that there's a time to work, and then there's a time to rest. And I mean, and surround the people around you who truly, truly love you, because at the end, they're the only ones that matter.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I think you always have to make sure you have a sense of self in this industry,
Totally.
right? Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
Which is interesting, because I think that when you enter in as a kid, you don't really have that kind of I call it that third eye, that awareness yet, because you're doing it because it's enjoyment to you. You don't realize you're in like the belly of the beast called entertainment.
Yes. Yeah. No, it's I mean, like I said, I kind of do it for fun, so it doesn't one of the things I found very frustrating actually recently is I've noticed, well, you were talking earlier about the way kids are different these days, and one of the things I think that they're very different, particularly this generation right now, is they're so like with the constant selfies, sorry, faces, selfies.
The selfies, yeah.
Should be called faces, yeah. And I was on set the other day, and there are all these, you're thinking, oh, well, they're doing it for their portfolio. All these women by the water constantly taking shots of themselves. But it's just, it's too much. It's all about, or whenever you're anywhere, you're always taking the selfie to prove you were there. It doesn't happen unless there's a picture to prove it, right?
Yeah.
Instead of this narcissistic need to constantly have a sense of you, right? And I think that's really dangerous.
It is dangerous, but I'm so happy to have been born and raised in the generation that I did, because I don't need to let everyone know where I'm at every time. Sometimes you have to, because I think you miss out on the experience if you're too busy trying to tape it.
Someone told me they went to a concert just recently, and the whole time people are watching it through their phones. Like they've got the phone up and they're watching, and you're like, you paid all that money.
What's the purpose? Oh, okay. So let me ask you the next question. What advice would you give your 19-year-old self?
Um, I was pretty at 19. I did a lot of traveling when I was younger, and I was pretty strong-minded in that. I just went and I did it. But interestingly enough, now, so I like the sense that I did. You know, I do believe you should really go for what you believe. What you believe, but now I think I would maybe say, I don't know. I mean, I'm happy with my life. I'm happy with the choices I made, but I think if I were younger, I probably would have made more concrete decisions, like a plan. Maybe
Right,
that's
right.
not the right answer, though. Maybe that's not the right answer. Having a plan. Maybe it was okay not to have a plan. Um, but I think I would have been a little more conservative. Interestingly enough, that must be a sign of age, right? Because I was a crazy one. I just went for it. You know, went traveling, and I didn't think about the consequences. But I'm glad I
That's
did.
the beauty of youth.
Yes. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, yeah, maybe it wasn't a wrong decision. Maybe it wasn't. But
So
and I
what?
kind of, sorry.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'm sorry. You had a thought.
And I think I mean, my interest in film. It's interesting because I grew up with film, so I didn't have as much interest in it growing up in it. It's
Yeah.
interesting because it's right there. It's, you know, so it didn't have the same awe for me, right? Because I
Mhm.
was on set, I was around set, you know, repeating scenes. It didn't have the same glow for me. But it did as I got older, and that's the other thing. I realized I really like acting. I wish I discovered it, pushed it more when I was younger. That for sure.
Listen, there's
It's
still
a fun
time.
world.
It's still time. I mean, it's not over till it's over.
I don't know how you break in at my age, but who knows?
Okay, so what feeds your spirit?
Oh, communication, people like that. This COVID's killing us all, right? Like just the
Yeah,
lack of the ability to connect and hang, just, you know, just new experiences, right? With people,
yeah,
with other people around, you know. I feel like my world is so small. I'm sure everyone does, you know. It's
yeah.
just,
If you feel like it's gotten smaller.
yeah.
Yeah,
So I love connecting with people, having new experiences. I love the outdoors. I love being outside. That gives me great, going for hikes, long walks, that kind of
yeah,
thing is great. But yeah, looking forward to, I mean, I was thinking, like, what do I miss? It's not, I don't miss necessarily concerts or things like that. I just miss those opportunities to chat with people you don't know. And, you
I miss the coffee dates.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, for sure. Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
So what are you grateful for?
My health, number one, big one, your health for sure. Um, my family, you know, the people around you are I was pretty devastated by the loss of my dad.
Yeah,
He was one of my best friends. So that's been really hard, really hard.
yeah,
But you realize death is a part of life.
absolutely.
Unfortunately,
Yeah,
it's a shitty
yeah,
deal, but it's part of the way things work. So that's then your friends and family become even more precious, right?
absolutely.
Yeah.
And after that, everything that they've taught you becomes precious, and it
Yes.
becomes a gift every day. It becomes a
Abs-
gift. You know,
absolutely.
I think that you doing the street naming is definitely a gift in his honor as well.
Yeah. Thank you. That's. I mean, like I said, you just desperately want to keep them alive in whatever way you can. You know, their
Yeah,
memory alive, their influence alive. Yeah. No, he's huge in my life. You know, so I
yeah,
want to give something back. Yeah.
yeah. If anybody has any questions in the audience, it's open. Feel free to ask any questions you want to. Once again, I'm talking to Georgia Hood, and I'm just so grateful that I had this opportunity to speak and just share and shed light on your life, your dad's life, a little bit about his history with Degrassi, um, I oftentimes like wonder again, like um, if a show as raw and as honest as the original show was, um, would that be attractive to the youth today? Because I think everything now, especially with kids today, is so superficial that I think that I oftentimes wonder if they would be attracted to that.
I think it was the look of it is not polished, right? So that's the part that I think might not grab them. But if they got into the still into the issues of what they were talking about in the programs, I think that would still hold water. I think those issues would still be, you know, relevant. But
Yeah.
it's just not it's not flashy enough to grab their attention in the beginning. Like I said, I find it really strange when I do come back across Degrassi Next Generation or whatever, and I'm like, wow, that's so slick. It looks like, so American. So, like the girls have perfect hair and perfect makeup. I'm like, is this Degrassi? Really?
Yeah.
Where's Spike?
It's like no, central casting is where we're going. We're going.
Yeah. So, well, that's interesting. It's an interesting question. I mean, how much TV is there now that's raw like that, right? It's also polished, right?
Yeah. I mean, I remember things like One to Row On. I think we were always being in the 80s. I can remember, I'll tell my age. In the 80s, we could remember that there was always, in almost in every area of television, it was always some type of topical, educational influence that was being thrown at us, even on network televisions at sometimes, So it was always there, but I don't know about today, man. I pray a lot that we'll be okay with this new generation coming up.
Yeah, it is a bit. I know. I think I feel for them because they've just got so much coming at them all the time.
Yeah.
So much coming, and having to turn on a dime, right? Like this whole COVID thing, and like all the kids in school, university, having to do the whole online thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, Georgia, I thank you so much for coming on to have a conversation with me. For those, once again, I'm gonna repeat this: change.org. Please sign the petition for kids' street sign to go up. We're still working on that. The link is in my bio, so you can sign the petition. You could donate. If you have any questions, I will be more than happy to answer them after this broadcast is over. And I'm going to ask Georgia, is it okay if I kind of just shoot questions to you as I get them?
Sure, absolutely.
Awesome.
Great.
Awesome.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Once again, so good. Hopefully next time in Toronto, we can have coffee and donuts.
That would be great. That would be lovely. I love it. Thank you so much for doing this, Phil John.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Thank you. Have a good night, everybody.
Thank you. Take care. Thank you. Bye-bye.